Okay, I'm just amused at thinking about, like the power of like the bloodline of this snake, to do with Cain's bloodline. Um, and like I don't know if you've heard of the term Enshittyfication. It means that, like as in the last video I went on about chocolate. How that was used as probably a medicine, probably during Tartarian times, like pre-Victorian. And like everything that they touch, and like gets circus-fied, like wrapped up in poison, a bit like in Walt Disney when she eats the or is it Sleeping Beauty, I should say, she eats the apple and it poisons her. So whatever this kind of snake sort of line does, like it's always wrapped up in sweetness to tempt you, and then they like they get you that way, like you're either hostage to them or, they're poisoning you some way. And I think that's to do with Cain's bloodline being angry of probably all the way back to, like Cain and Abel, and like the offerings wasn't good enough. And I think it's probably because they rejected God, or, like this, there's just something within their bloodline. To do with the rebellion, like with Satan and stuff, the father of that, the enemy. But it's just the traits. You just know them by the traits, like with the narcissism and stuff like that. And God, is firmly saying, if you look to me, I can put this right. You will become an equal. You won't be a sub-race. But it's like whether they're willing, because like God loves like Satan, Lucifer, because he's still under his remit and he's still very much alive and kicking. God knows him best. Like it's not as pure and simple and straightforward as what you think. But anyway, that's like Enshittyfication is like, just everything that's been adopted by this snake mentality, where they took something that was good and solid and completely like wrecked it, a bit like George Soros with like open societies and that. What seems a good idea on the surface, like multiculturalism and stuff like that, like how it can have a real problem, like when there's bloodlines going back to lands and stuff like that. It's just something that isn't thought through, and like the wheels come off of it eventually. So that's the word of today: Enshittyfication.